How's it going, lads? Jack here from Absoluteboxxing. I'm joined today with...
That's where I leave you, just continue. Yeah, so Q Morrissey, casual boxing viewer who knows some things.
And collector.
Yeah, well, collector of boxing tickets and seemingly other strange stuff as well that I find on Vinted and eBay.
So we're going to be jumping into the Moses Itauma versus Jermaine Franklin card live at the Co-op Arena this Saturday. And we're going to just be giving our predictions, breaking down the fights and all that. So I'd say we start off with Shakiel Thompson versus Brad Paul's middleweight. Is it an interim fight?
I'm not quite sure,
or
actually.
Not interim, but I think it's number one contender.
Something to that effect, yeah. It's just looking at there, Shakiel Thompson, Brad Paul's middleweight. Doesn't have anything attached to it. Not for any sort of kind of like rinky-dink title.
It could be WBO. Possibly. Isn't that the one that...
Is it WBO Global title, I think they call it these days?
Something along those lines. As you can tell, we did a lot of research.
Yeah, so much research. Well, look, to be fair, with all the sanctioning bodies, you have WBC's silver belt, you have your WBO Global belt or whatever. So look, they invent new titles every week. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, so Brad Pauls is going into this fight with a record of 22-1. And Shakiel Thompson's coming into this with a perfect record of 15-0. It's actually for the IBF International title.
Cool.
I found that.
Whatever that indicates. Yeah, I suppose when it comes to this fight, like Shakiel Thompson obviously is improving, and look, it's the same throughout the card. You're talking about really prospects more than anything, even down to Moses Itauma. But Shakiel Thompson's first real step up is I suppose the way you could really look at it. Brad Paul's fairly proven, pretty decent at a domestic level. So I suppose it's going to be interesting, really, because I suppose you can't really get many kind of challengers like Brad Paul's. That's going to be fighting somebody who's 15-0, you know?
Yeah. Like Brad Pauls did take Nathan Heaney's undefeated record back in 2024 for the middleweight title, the British middleweight title. He then lost that against Denzel Bentley, which, you know, Denzel Bentley's going on to fight for, I think it's an interim title now, and it could be upgraded because of Janabek failing a drug test. So it proves like the level that he is on.
Yeah, I suppose big difference in terms of experience there as well, because even looking through the records of the guys that Shakiel Thompson has faced, obviously none of them are kind of up to the standard of Brad Paul's. So look, it'll be an interesting
fight. He seems to have a lot of hype behind him, which is interesting.
Not necessarily proven. Even at a level below Brad Paul's, I wouldn't say he's actually proven. It's kind of almost like jumping 2 steps, really, when you look at the rest of his record. So it'll be interesting.
Like his last fight, Grant Dennis, you'd say he is a journeyman. Like he will put it on people, but at the same time, like he's at a certain level. I know Nathan Heaney fought him in his last fight, and it was also Thompson's last fight. Thompson knocked him out in the second round, which is very surprising. He knocked him out with a body shot, and you don't really get that with a lot of journeymen where they want to be stopped. They don't give you the opportunity.
Yeah, but look, generally speaking, it's better for the journeyman if he's going to last throughout the fight, regardless of who he's fighting. So look, in a sense, I guess it's impressive, but the guy's still a prospect. So like, it's a big step up. So either way, look, we'll see what way it unfolds. Personally, I think Brad Pauls will probably end up actually taking the win for this one. I just don't see anything from Shakiel Thompson that really kind of says that he's going to win this easily. So I'm still going with Brad Pauls.
The only thing that like interests me a lot is Thompson being a 6'3" middleweight. Like that's like kind of unheard of. Like you don't see that a lot. Like I think the only fella kind of like that was Hamza Shiraz of recent years. Like someone that big.
Kind of, yeah. Somebody maybe like Paul Williams going back even further. Kind of notoriously tall for the weight. But they do come along. They do come along from time to time.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how Brad Pauls is able to break the distance and get in to get his shots off. Will he get caught on the way in? It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, look, as I said, personally, I think in this case, I think his experience is what trumps Shakiel Thompson's experience, obviously. I mean, look, 15-0, and who's he really fought? So look, it's one of those, it could go either way. Maybe Shakiel Thompson actually is the real deal. And if he is, beating Brad Pauls, nice name to have on his record. But vice versa, if he isn't what he's kind of made out to be, well, then Brad Pauls is the guy to prove that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm kind of on the same boat as you with Brad Pauls. I think the experience is going to outweigh everything that Shakiel Thompson has done. I know he's a heavy-handed fighter, but I think Brad Pauls is smart enough, and I think he'll be able to box his way to a victory. I think it'll be tough in the first couple rounds, but overall, I think he's going to come out with the win.
Watch this become a terrible take in just a few days' time. But yeah, no, look, personally, I still think just Pauls has too much for him. But look, love to be proven wrong. But at the same time, just based on the limited couple of, I suppose, clips and fights I have seen of Shakiel Thompson, I still think that Pauls has enough to be able to beat him. Yeah,
like Pauls has never been stopped, and like his fight against Denzel Bentley, which was his last big staged fight. Like Bentley is a heavy-handed individual, 17 KOs, and like we've seen that Brad Pauls stayed in there, even though I think there was something to do with his eye socket at one stage, and he kind of powered through that. I think he got like a fractured eye socket, or I could be talking out my ass. I remember there was something with his eye, and he kind of powered through that, so it shows how tough he is.
Yeah, all the same though, out of all the type of injuries that you probably don't want to power through, anything related to the eyes wouldn't exactly be up there.
Yeah, the Nuki bomb, Brad Pauls with the Cornish power. He's just going to tough it out. But yeah, so both of us are in agreement with this one. Brad Pauls to win, probably majority decision, I'm guessing. I don't think it'll be a knockout.
No, and that's kind of a theme that I've noticed, even looking at the card like throughout. I don't think we're going to see too many knockouts out of it. Watch it now be 7 knockouts, right? But
yeah, it's like an ultimate card of knockouts.
Yeah, famous last words. But at the same time, just kind of looking at who's on it, I don't think we're looking at an early night by any means.
Yeah. Okay. So, what do you want to go on to next? Will we do Heaney or Taylor Hutchinson?
I suppose we can look at Taylor Hutchinson.
Yeah.
Look, again, another one of those fights where you're talking about a serious prospect coming up against somebody who, in a sense, is a gatekeeper. Like, as we would have mentioned even before we came on, Willy Hutchinson is, at best, probably a European level fighter. That's not to slight him by any means, but that is his ceiling. He's an awkward fighter. Right, so he's going to put up a decent fight against anybody because of his style. His style isn't exactly textbook by any means, and that's what makes him
so unorthodox that it can mess with a lot of people.
Yeah, and look, if Taylor's not up to it, then it'll start to show. But just based on what I've seen of Ezra Taylor, I don't think he's going to struggle too badly. I would be very, very, very surprised if Hutchinson ends up winning this. Imagine if any of the fights are going to probably go early, other than the Itauma fight, of course, I'd say it will probably be Taylor versus Hutchinson, and I could see it ending probably within 6 to 8 rounds with Taylor coming out the winner.
The only caveat I have to that is it's a 10-round fight, not a 12-round fight, which I thought was pretty interesting for a WBO global title. I know that doesn't really hold much value, but for the amount of time that Hutchinson has been out of the ring, I think his last fight was in October against Mark Jeffers. And he's not a fella that kind of keeps himself completely fit. I know he's had probably a long camp because of the postponement, but still, that is interesting that it's only 10 rounds and not 12.
Yeah, I suppose from a stamina perspective, I'm still going to favour Taylor when it comes down to it. Now, let's be honest, same thing as we were saying about Shakiel Thompson. If you look at Taylor's record, he doesn't have too many names on there. But obviously, enough, he hasn't had all that many fights either. I think he only has something like, is it 13 fights?
13 fights, yeah.
13 fights so far. So realistically, who's going to be on there? So again, it's a pretty big step up compared to where he's been. But just based on Taylor's previous performances, he's been really, really impressive. But again, you have to look at the opponents. Who has he been impressive against, really? You know, you're talking guys that don't exactly have the most impressive records and who probably really haven't fought anybody of note. So again, big step up. And if he's going to get found out, he's going to get found out against Hutchinson.
Yeah, Hutchinson's one of those fellas. Like, if you're not on par, like, he's going to show it on the night.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, again, he fulfills that gatekeeper role quite well, I'd imagine. That's kind of the point in his career that he's at as well, where you're going to start seeing him going against prospects. Now, don't get me wrong. Look, he could potentially prove us wrong, but I just don't think so. I think this is probably one of the more clear-cut fights on the card overall, just based on Taylor's previous performances. I mean, if you look at him, once he gets going and once he gets inside, that's usually it. You know, he has plenty of different angles that he can come from. And I just think even though Hutchinson is awkward, I still think that Taylor will overpower him in the end.
Yeah, like in Hutchinson's last couple of fights, he beat Mark Jeffers' 7th round TKO, which I was very surprised of at the time. Then his fight before that was 2024, nearly a year, or yeah, over a year. Before that was against Buatsi on the Joshua versus Dubois card. And he lost a split decision where I think he was knocked down a couple of times in that fight.
Yeah, like, if I remember correctly, he was in pretty rough shape towards the end of that.
Yeah, I think that's where the stamina problems come from, like where I've seen it anyway. Like, that was a 12-round fight and he didn't look too fit.
Yeah, and stamina problems and inactivity. Not exactly the best mix.
Like, his the fight before that as well, Craig Richards, that was kind of his standout fight in Riyadh, where he won that, and I think that was the Matchroom versus Queensbury fight. And I think everyone kind of thought Craig Richards was going to win that.
Yeah, and that was the expectation, I believe, at the time. But even looking at Richards' performance, I thought Richards was too, I suppose, for want of a better word, too orthodox in terms of his style. He was too easy to see coming for somebody like Hutchinson, who has that unorthodox style.
Hutchinson kind of hopes that you're going to be as orthodox as possible.
Yeah, I mean, Richards was very upright, quite rigid in terms of how he approached the fight. So again, I suppose he kind of fell for what Hutchinson does, which is being elusive, being difficult, and drawing from strange angles.
Yeah. He has one loss as well, a TKO loss to Lennox Clark. Now, that was back in 2021. But it just shows that he can be stopped. Like, and if that's in his head already, you know, someone with heavy hands like Taylor, he could come along and force the pressure early, and you don't know what could happen.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we've seen some funny stoppages in the last couple of months. Obviously, the likes of the Joseph Parker fight against Fabio Wardley was questionable to some degree, but again, this is the kind of fight where I can just see that the volume of punches that Taylor's going to put onto Hutchinson is probably what's going to end it. You're probably talking TKO 6th or 7th round by the time the Hutchinson stamina issues really start to come out.
Yeah, I think it might go a bit later, if I'm being honest, but I do think Taylor probably has it. I think if the power, if his power lasts into the later rounds, I believe that. With Hutchinson's gas tank, I think it could be a late stoppage.
Yeah, I think, look, really, the way that I could see it ending is that he'll end up being overwhelmed and he just won't have enough to be able to throw back. Yeah,
Taylor seems like a fighter with a lot in him. Like, he reminds me of kind of like a Wardley, where if shit's going wrong for him, I think he's going to bite down on the gum shield and he's going to start swinging.
Well, if ever there was an opportunity to prove it, considering, as we said, like Hutchinson is experienced, he's had some good fights. he's proven to be a decent opponent in pretty much every fight that he's been in over the last couple of years. So look, again, nice step up, interesting fight. Kind of a coming out party in a sense, just like it is for Shakiel Thompson, assuming he gets past Brad Pauls.
Yeah, it's going to be definitely an interesting watch. Looking forward to it. I think this could be fight of the night as well, to be honest.
Same here, yeah. I think this one's kind of a sleeper in a sense, much like Echo Esserman versus Jack Catterall a few months back. I think this one might actually surprise us. So I'm going for Taylor, don't get me wrong. I don't see any way that he loses this one. But at the same time, I think it could be competitive if Hutchinson has enough left in the gas tank.
Yeah. Okay, so the next fight on the card is Nathan the Hitman Heaney versus Gerome Warburton. Is there any belts on the line for this? I'm just going to check quickly. Fuck's sake, I go through BoxRec like a madman.
You better hope it's not a WBA belt.
It could be, to be honest. It doesn't say anything on BoxRec, but yeah, that could just be a lie.
Even looking at this fight, I suppose realistically, Warburton, I just don't see how he wins this. I know that Heaney is obviously pushing on. I mean, he's 36 now, and obviously he's in his last year of his career, and he's outright said that. But I don't think Warburton's going to provide too much to unsettle him, assuming that he's still at the level that he was. Again, obviously 36 years old. There's the possibility he gets old overnight. And that's not out of the question,
and a lot of people are saying that's already happened.
Yeah, but like, the only thing
is, I wouldn't say it myself, but like there is the argument he had the split decision draw against Brad Pauls in 2024. Then the rematch lost to TKO in the 12th round, where he was out on his feet at that stage, and when the ref stepped in. Then he came back in February of 2025 against Sofian Kati, a 17-5 fighter. And that's declared a no contest now over a failed drug test. So just kind of proves, But I think he was stopped in that fight as well. He was knocked out in that fight, which didn't look very good for his record at the time. But now looking back, that it was a no contest, you have to put it into perspective.
Yeah, I suppose, look, a no contest is no contest. It's one of those things that's always going to be overlooked. But just in terms of, I suppose, what Warburton offers, from what I've seen of him, he just seems to be kind of a one-dimensional pressure fighter and not one that really carries much in terms of power. So I suppose from Heaney's perspective, that kind of feeds into what he's able to do. I think Heaney's just an overall better boxer that has more to offer. But again, 36 years old, has previously shown to have stamina issues in the last year of his career. Who knows? This could probably be one of those fights where it's a bit of an upset. Like, I wouldn't say it's out of the question that Warburton could win it, but I just think Heaney will have enough. I think Warburton's just too one-dimensional.
Yeah, like Warburton has a record of 16-2-2. And 16 of his wins, he's only had 2 knockouts. So it kind of shows that there's not a lot of power there.
Exactly.
And he has been stopped by Kieran Conway. So, Kieran Conway is a heavy hitter compared to Nathan Heaney. But it shows that he can be stopped.
True, yeah. And I just think, look, overall, I don't think Warburton has much of a pedigree behind him. So I just think that in terms of opponents that you could have put with Heaney at this point in his career, he's probably the best choice, really. You're talking a guy who comes forward, doesn't really have too much power, and has been proven that, he can be stopped, even though Heaney's not a very heavy hitter himself.
Yeah, and like with Nathan Heaney, he's fought the likes of Denzel Bentley, beat him. He outboxed him for 12 rounds, which was very impressive, and Bentley is a heavy hitter. So if he's able to outbox someone like that, Like, if boxing mat adds up, he should be able to do that to Warburton as well.
Well, again, look,
Does it ever add up?
Famous last words potentially.
Yeah,
but
yeah, I think there's a lot on the line for Nathan Heaney in this fight.
Yeah,
with the Janabek belt, that could be on the line for Denzel Bentley, and there has been talks before. I think they were supposed to have the rematch with him, with Heaney and Bentley, in November of last year.
Yeah,
and it ended up falling through because of Chisora and Dillian White not being able to come to an agreement for a contract. So that fight could be down the line with a world title fight on the line as well.
Being honest, even though Heaney has previously beaten Bentley, I don't think that's really what he needs at this point.
Probably not, but I think the confidence Heaney does have, and like he's such a like awkward fighter in the way, or for someone like a Denzel Bentley, where he wants someone walking forward and kind of taking him on head to head. That's where Brad Pauls, I think, kind of fell apart in that fight, where he was kind of standing in front of Bentley the whole time. I think Heaney's one of those fellas. He's very elusive in that way.
Yeah, I think, look, overall, I think Heaney has more to offer in, I suppose, technical boxing, especially against the likes of Warburton. Obviously enough, I'd like to see Heaney win it. I'd like to see him get that fight in the Bet365 stadium in Stoke. Well, there we go. Get that homecoming fight. Stadium. Yeah. But yeah, look, it'd be great if he does win it. It's a feel-good moment. But at the same time, I think, for what he has left in the tank, you could see an upset. But at the same time, I don't think it's likely. I think Heaney wins this one pretty handy.
Yeah, from the interviews I've seen with him as well, the longer camp, the postponement actually helped him out more than anything. He says that his fitness levels that he thought he had in his previous fights, like, basically doubled, if not, for this fight, and he feels like it could be overtraining, but to him, he seems like it's doing him a lot more benefits.
Yeah, well, look, he's always a guy that comes into every fight in fantastic shape. So in the end of the day, I mean, maybe he's in better shape for it, maybe not. Because again, like, okay, fair enough, he's had an extra long camp, but that also means he probably has more wear on his body than he otherwise would have had. So not easy in that sense, especially at 36 years old and with stamina issues. But I still think, despite all that, he's going to have more than Warburton's able to take, really. I just don't see Warburton being able to really figure Heaney out, especially with the kind of style that he has. I think it kind of feeds into what Heaney does well. So look, personally, I think Heaney most likely by unanimous decision.
Yeah, I'm exactly on the same page with that. And I don't think Warburton has fought in front of a big crowd like this. And the Stokies that come to support Nathan Heaney, they are very loud. I think he sold over 2,000 tickets himself.
Exactly.
And, like, that's
he has a fantastic fan base, and there's not many out there that are going to have anything similar to it. So in the end of the day, look, I think in a sense it's kind of a gimme fight for Heaney. Look, I think overall you kind of expect him to win it. Could be an upset, as I said, if he is particularly shot worn, but overall I just think, look, he'll win it. Feel good moment, obviously, with the crowd, and then move on to that homecoming fight.
Yeah. Okay, and the last fight, the main fight of the night, Moses Itauma versus Jermaine Franklin. So, do you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. Look, how long is it going to last? I think that's the real question. Are we going to see Jermaine Franklin get beaten silly for a couple of rounds before it eventually gets stopped? Again, hard to tell. Franklin hasn't actually been stopped before, and he managed to take Anthony Joshua the distance. Now, albeit probably not the best version of Anthony Joshua by any means.
Definitely not.
But at the same time, it's still an achievement, It's better than many have done. But still, looking at this fight, I can't see any way that Itauma loses it, simply because Franklin doesn't really offer much other than durability. In a sense, he kind of reminds me of the likes of a Carlos Takam, somebody who is technically world level, but at the same time, not really a viable opponent when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I haven't seen many a fighter like Jermaine Franklin come off of back-to-back losses and come out with a better kind of standing than most fighters. It doesn't make sense to me, but the durability of him seemed to sell him more than anything, because he's not much of a talker. Like, there's not much behind him at all, really, besides he can take a punch.
That's pretty much it. You know, it's the name value of having gone the full distance with Anthony Joshua. Other than that, as we said, he doesn't exactly have a whole lot going for him. I guarantee if you were to look on YouTube and enter in Jermaine Franklin highlights, you probably won't find too many videos.
No, I think most of them will be from the Dillian White fight.
Yeah,
where a lot of people think he won that fight.
Yeah, and I suppose now we have question marks over the state that Dillian White's been in. Like, obviously,
I think he was already kind of worn out from the fights previous to that. I think Jermaine Franklin kind of got lucky in that fight where he got him at a good time where, you know, he wasn't that firing on all cylinders.
Exactly, and I suppose in a sense Moses Itauma is unproven as well. I mean, look, if Franklin fought a version of Dillian White that was seemingly shot, then what did Itauma fight? You know,
yeah, because that fight happened back in 2022. That fight against Dillian White.
Yeah,
like that's going back.
Since then, I believe White's fought in, what was it, Malta, and he fought in Ireland at some point as well.
Yeah, he fought in Mayo, and was it Gibraltar?
Possibly Gibraltar. It makes sense. One of those kind of far-flung, strange places to have a fight.
So he fought in Castlebar, Mayo. So he went from fighting in Wembley Arena, or Wembley Stadium, then Wembley Arena, then Castlebar, Mayo, then Gibraltar, and then Riyadh.
Some real fight night career mode kind of stuff. Yeah, and look, as I said, like, Itauma's obviously been incredibly impressive, but at the same time,
who has he fought?
Dillian White's a name, and don't get me wrong, he was obviously pretty decent at one point in time, but how much of him was left by the time that Itauma fought him?
Yeah, and like for Itauma to go in and do that to him in a round, like,
it was super impressive.
Very impressive, but at the same time, there wasn't much coming back from White in that fight. I felt from the minute the first bell rang, he was in there to survive.
Exactly.
And he's not a very defensive fighter, so it was just waiting till Itauma hit him.
Like, no disrespect to Jermaine Franklin, fair enough. You know, he's ranked to some degree, and I imagine he'll probably last maybe 2 or 3 rounds, potentially at least. Hopefully a few more. But when it comes down to it, I'd much rather see Moses Itauma fight the likes of Zhili Zhang. There's an awful lot more intrigue in a fight like that, just based on Zhang's power alone, even though he has no stamina.
Or Hrgovic. I'd find it very interesting to see Hrgovic because of the chin Hrgovic has. That fight against David Adelaide, like the punches he took in that, I think it was the 8th round.
Yeah, the amount of headbutts that he took from Daniel Dubois, I mean, sensational. So durable. I mean, what a fight that was, just to count the headbutts alone. But yeah, look, I'd imagine Jermaine Franklin, I hope, is going to last a couple of rounds just so that we get to see more of what Moses Itauma has to offer. But I don't see this one being an upset by any means. Think
not. Like, even Franklin's last fight, that was in September on the Canelo Crawford card. I think it was the Canelo Crawford card. He fought Ivan Ditchko, and that was a very poor performance, to say the least.
Yeah, it was a sleeper of a fight. I mean, look, I watched that card from start to finish. I still don't remember anything from that fight. So
the point deducted at one stage, I think that was the highlight moment.
Amazing. Yeah, and look, it's no disrespect to
Just wanted
Jermaine
to, like,
Franklin, but as we said, he's not somebody who provides a highlight reel, and he never
no,
has
he's
done
in
that.
there to kind of dog it out, if anything.
Yeah, he's
But
an opponent.
he,
Sadly, that is the role that he fulfills. I don't think there's anybody that's pulling for him to to win this, or anybody who's going to assume that he's going to put up much of a challenge. I'd love to be proven wrong. As I said, look, it'd be amazing if we did see Itauma actually being challenged, but I just don't think Franklin's the guy to do it.
yeah, like Itauma or Franklin hasn't been the most active fighter either. I think he's had a fight nearly every year. But even saying that, like that's not the activity you want in a fighter.
Yeah, especially in a crowded heavyweight division. I mean,
Yeah,
realistically,
where
it's
he
not like
could be getting fights.
it's not like there wasn't guys out there to fight. There's plenty of guys who weren't particularly active themselves that he could have been fighting, but he didn't. You know, and a lot of
I
it, I
do know
suppose.
that
Yeah, go ahead.
he did spare Fabio Wardley, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and
Mm.
Fabio Wardley is trained by Ben Davidson, so I'd say there was a lot of looking at him in that spare to see was he a suitable fighter for his upcoming prospect Itauma.
Yeah, well, look, as we said, in terms of what he offers, I'd imagine it's not going to be much. I don't like putting it like that, but it's not going to be much. I mean, realistically, I suppose he's younger is it than Dillian White, but outside of
Yeah, but
that,
that's not saying much.
yeah, it's not it's not saying much at all. But he also doesn't really offer a whole lot in terms of offense. So look, I
Yeah, I
suppose
think
that
there's just going to be a lot of defense and a lot of him blocking punches, not really throwing punches.
yeah, potentially blocking a lot of punches with his face, depending on how long it goes. But look,
And we could see an early stoppage depending on the ref as well.
yeah, yeah, but I suppose part of it, you'd look at it and you say, okay, well, fair enough that Jermaine Franklin's never been stopped, but the other side of it as well is it really all that impressive if Itauma does stop him? I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
like
what does Franklin offer?
yeah, I think this is a fight they're trying to sell to us where it's going to be a lot more than what it actually is. You know,
Yeah,
there's not going to be much in the fight. I don't think. I think it's just going to be kind of a heavy bag drill for Itauma for however long it does last.
it's a highlight reel fight for Itauma.
Yeah,
That's what this really is kind of presented as, an opportunity for him to go a couple of rounds and, you know, just have something that they can show before his next fight.
yeah. I think there might be an incentive for Franklin to try to take it into the later rounds. I'd say Frank Warren might have a bit of cash lying around for him after the fight if he does bring Itauma to rounds, just to show him off a bit more.
Exactly. Yeah, something to put in the highlight reel on the zone. But look, as I said, like in terms of excitement for the fight, I'm not particularly excited for it. I'm interested, obviously, to see Moses Itauma fight again, but overall, I don't think we're going to see anything here that we haven't seen before.
No, I think with the offense that Itauma does bring to it, I think it could be over very soon from the starting bell.
Yeah,
Like even the way he took apart Dillian White in his last fight, pulling the gloves down and throwing punches in between. You know, he's after figuring out if someone isn't throwing, he knows how to combat that now. Whereas I think he had two decisions early in his career, and I think they were kind of learning fights more than anything for him.
yeah. I'd look, even in terms of his last couple of fights, guys that should have taken him a few rounds didn't. Like I mean, even if you look at obviously the fight against Dillian White being the prime example, I'd say most people would have assumed it would have gone probably 3 or 4 rounds at least, and obviously
Yeah,
only went the one. So look, overall, I don't see it going much differently. I suppose the real interest in the fight is who does Itauma potentially move on to next. Is it going to be somebody who's a viable opponent? You know, could it be somebody, as we said, like Hrgovic, who would be kind of, I suppose, an interesting contrast to what Itauma provides. Again, a viable opponent. I think the likes of Caballel probably a couple of steps ahead at this point in time. I don't think
definitely
he's
at this
kind of
stage
there
in his
yet.
career.
Yeah. I just don't see it making sense for really either of them. Overall, I think we still need to bring Itauma along. But the issue obviously is getting opponents for that. he's a very high risk, very low reward kind of fight.
Yeah, he doesn't have the pulling power at the moment to garner a lot of money to a fight, unless Frank Warren's like willing to risk losing a bit of money to gain it in the long term.
Yeah, like, look, I think long term, I suppose one of the options out there is to sacrifice maybe the likes of a Lawrence Okoli in order to build the name of Itauma. And again, no offense to Lawrence Okoli, but I just don't see him potentially putting up much against Itauma either.
Yeah, like Lawrence Okoli could spoil the Itauma train as well at the same time. Like, I could see that going very long, and the way Okoli does fight, he could potentially ruin an unbeaten career of Itauma.
Yeah, look, he could spoil his way to victory. And look, like, there's been examples in history where you could see fights like that, and it has turned out that way. Where you have these guys that they spoil, and look, they lean on people and they look to the ref at every possible opportunity and maybe try to jab their way to victory. And it could end up like that, but I just don't imagine that you're going to be able to hold down somebody like Itauma for that long.
Probably not. He's a bit too quick on the feet.
Yeah, to detract from what he does best, which is move and punch.
Yeah,
so I just don't think Okoli has the footwork for that either, to be able to actually keep up with Itauma.
No, especially if someone like Crispin Smith was able to basically take everything away from Lawrence Okoli that he does well. Like, he really beat him up that night. Kind of made him eat his own words in that sense.
Exactly, yeah. And look, for whatever reason, we're dogging on Lawrence Okoli.
Any possibility, because he ruined my first title fight that I ever seen. I'm going to dog on him.
Yeah, I can't. No offense, but I can't imagine much worse than that being your first title fight.
Yeah, David Light versus Lawrence Okoli.
Wow.
Anyway, back to Itauma.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to Itauma. I potentially could see his next fight being Jared Anderson, which I know is a random one, but he is a new signing to Queensbury as of today, I think. I think it was today.
Yeah.
He's fighting Solomon Dacres. And,
Yeah. He's one of those signings. I feel like he's being built up to be offered
up to be knocked down.
Yeah. I don't see why Frank Warren would bother really to sign him to kind of try to push him towards a world title. I just don't think it happens. I think maybe he wins one or two, they pair him with Itauma, and then it presents him, I suppose, Anderson as a bigger name than he kind of is at the moment even. So I think
it's more of like a build up for the American audience as well.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a name that the American audience know, and it's somebody that they can put in there. And to be honest, I don't think he causes Itauma problems. Could be proven wrong. Look, as we said, he's Itauma's still so early in his career that we don't actually know how good he is. But as you mentioned, in terms of commercial viability, it's a nice introduction of Itauma to an American audience if they do put him with Anderson down the line. But you're probably talking two fights away.
Yeah, another one could be Richard Torres Jr., depending how he gets on against Frank Sanchez.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't think Sanchez is going to be the same since the knee issues.
Definitely not. And the only gripe I would have with Richard Torres is the chin, because he has been knocked out in the past. I think it was it was in the amateurs. I don't know, was it the Olympics or was it like the Worlds or some? But he got sparked out cold, and that's the only thing I keep watching out for him. If he can take a punch on the chin by 10-ounce gloves, because it's a completely different game.
It's true, I suppose. But the other side of it too, as well, is like, how much does Sanchez really have left? If his knees are as bad as it seems they are, well, then I don't think he's going to be as much of a threat as he potentially could be if he was healthy, obviously, for Torres. Torres as well.
Yeah, and he's also in his 60s, so that's another...
another
problem.
I've been a little bit doubtful of Frank Sanchez's age for a while. And look, that's no slight to him. But again, look, there's been rumors for many, many years that Cuban fighters mightn't be as young as they present themselves.
I'd be very interested to see if his leg is like a tree, and when they cut it up and do the knee surgery, you could just see the rings of life on him. I'd say he was a lot older than 30.
It turns out he's actually a fossil. Look, just based on how bad his knees are, I don't think he's ever getting back to where he was.
No, I don't think. I think the Ajikabayel fight was kind of his the turning point towards the bad side of his career.
Yeah,
I think he's still going to put on a good performance, but yeah,
I think he's another guy that could end up as a gatekeeper over time, where he's still a viable threat, but his movement is going to be massively hampered.
Kind of like a Luis Ortiz.
Yeah, very much like a Luis Ortiz, I suppose, in that sense, where, look, you could put anybody in there with him, and there's always the possibility of an upset, but at the same time, again, I don't think he's going to be winning a title anytime soon.
Yeah. So, yeah, back to Itauma, because we're kind of jumping all around the place now. I do think, like, viable options for his next fight, if he does look great against Franklin, which I think both of us assume is going to happen, is probably like a Filip Hrgovic, Zhile Zhang, or maybe Richard Torres or Big Baby Anderson.
Who
I think they're kind of the
something,
kind of the main names.
You might even see him in there against the winner of Chisora versus Wilder, for all we know. Because look,
I hope not.
If we're being completely honest, I mean, we were talking about how shot worn and shot that Dillian White was. I can't imagine that Derek Chisora is in much of a better position, and he's been inactive now for quite some time. So again, look, I am partially looking forward to Chisora versus Wilder, but at the same time, I'm not really sure what we're going to see with it. I think Wilder's far past the best as well.
Yeah, I'd say we hold off on that one now until next week.
Yeah, look,
seeing that it is coming up.
One eye on that one. I suppose there's just so little to really get into with Itauma. It's all about potential. It's all about what he's done.
Yeah. There's not many talking points at the moment.
There's not much.
Which way to go with him?
Yeah, there's not much to look into with the guy. I suppose the problem, the reason that he has such notoriety, and also the problem with his career so far, is that he just hasn't had enough rounds. The guy is a massive threat, but he's also essentially an unknown.
Yeah, like he's so good at the moment, you don't know how good he is.
Exactly. And we mightn't even find out in this fight. It could be a fight or two down the line.
I don't believe we will. I think this is another kind of it's gonna look good on paper in the long term, but I think the fight itself is gonna be very one-sided, like David Hay said.
Yeah, something like that.
You won't.
Something we just won't repeat because it's out there. You can look it up. Yeah, unbelievable. But yeah, look, I mean, truthfully, it'd be nice if there was something to talk about when it comes to Itauma, especially probably after the fight. It'll again be probably a highlight reel knockout or whatever. But yeah, at the time being, he's just hard to speak about. He's been fantastic, and that's really it.
Yeah, he's been as flawless as an amateur, like with the amateur pedigree that he had. Like he's been flawless in the pros. There hasn't been like a step gone wrong yet for him.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, I just think we're at a point in his career where we really won't know how good he is for at least another 2 to 3 fights. And even then, we mightn't know because, again, he's only, 21 years old?
I think 22? He's only 20.
Is he only 20, is it?
Yeah. I think he... I will fact check that quickly. He is... Oh, yeah, 21. Yeah, I think he was 21 in February.
Okay, so, come on. Heavyweight. And he's 21.
Yeah.
And you have guys at heavyweight who are reaching their peak at 36? So, yeah. I still think,
ahead of him.
I still think we're just looking at the first steps, really. That's all it is.
Yeah, like he could even have a couple losses in the future, and it won't be the end of him by any means.
Exactly. Look, if the guy is healthy, he probably has another 15 years in him. So this is really only the start.
The one interesting thing to look at, though, is the postponement of the fight was over I think it was a torn bicep. I know, like, for someone like Itauma, he probably healed up fairly well for it to be rescheduled so quickly, but it is something to look at.
Yeah, I suppose in terms of kind of niggling injuries and that, I don't know many that have had their career exactly massively hampered by a bicep injury. But yeah, look, everybody has injuries in boxing, so it's inevitable that at some point or another he was going to pick something up. But I suppose the important thing was that the fight was postponed. He didn't try to fight through it and then potentially get lost that he didn't really deserve. So look, hopefully we're getting a 100% version of Moses Itauma, which I imagine we are. And again,
hopefully he lays off the ganja for the week.
That we can, neither confirm nor deny that he may potentially have engaged with. But yeah, it does seem that there's rumors out there, all right, that he might have been under the influence of something at some point.
Would we quickly go on to Fundora versus? Oh my God,
I'm losing Thurman.
Yeah, Thurman. Yeah, two-time Thurman at this stage, because this is kind of a second attempt at his career.
I'll be honest, I don't think there's many fighters that have actually squandered a career quite as much as Keith Thurman has. It feels like at this point he's been around forever, which he has. I mean, he has. I remember reading about him in Boxing News back in like 2011, I think it was. So yeah, and that feels like
that's probably when I was just getting into boxing.
Yeah, probably. I remember
he's been around for.
Yeah, he's been around since at least 2011, 2012, something like that, I think, if not even earlier. And I remember he kind of came up around the same time as the likes of Terence Crawford. So just to give perspective as to just how long he's actually been around. And obviously he's had massive inactivity. And the loss to Pacquiao is still his only loss on his record. So again, look, on paper he looks good, don't get me wrong, but he's like 37 years old, I think, now.
Yeah, he is. Does it say it? It does not say it on BoxRec, but I'm guessing he is around. He is in his 30s anyway. He's on the later stages of 30.
Yeah, and for the weight that he is,
37 years old. Yeah,
that's inevitably going to work against him. But at the same time, I don't think he's necessarily a spent 37 by any means, considering that he hasn't really fought all that much. But again, ring rust is real. This could be the fight where it shows. But look, he has
had a couple of fights that have fallen through. That's the one thing that is interesting. Like, how many training camps has he had in between?
Like, we've even spoken about this before. Like, theoretically, it's not out of the picture that he could potentially have a fight with Manny Pacquiao down the line again. Should he actually be surprised at all? You never know. These days, you never know. And look, do I really want to see it? Kinda, in a morbid curiosity.
You're like me, you want to see the fight. You just want to see any fight.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I'd like to see history made in the sense of potentially Pacquiao beating Thurman twice, but at the same time, look, this fight was Fundora. I'm not all that interested in it, if I'm completely honest. I don't really see the point in Thurman's comeback. I think he did everything that he was going to do by the time he was in his early 30s, and after that his interest in boxing just seemed to completely wane. So I don't know how much he has left, but it's going to be interesting regardless. But it's not a fight that's been very well advertised either. Like, it doesn't seem.
No, I think there was a postponement of this fight as well. And I think Fundora was injured, which kind of dragged it on for longer. But it being I think it's a PBC card on Amazon. So how are you supposed to promote something on Amazon Prime? There's only so much you can do.
How are you supposed to promote anything if you're PBC? It's against the rules.
Yeah. The inactivity for him, like 2022, he fought Mario Barrios. Then he fought Brock Jarvis, which I didn't even hear of until this fight in 2025. So he's been out of the ring nearly a year. And now he's fighting for a world title.
This is his comeback, right? So, like, the guy's had massive inactivity, followed by one fight, followed by more inactivity. Like
Yeah.
realistically, you can't really tell where he's at. So
Yeah,
it's going
and
to be interesting to see.
I think it's the worst person to come back out of an inactive career to fight a 6'6", like fighter, you know, like super welterweight, 154 pound, or is it? Yeah, 154.
I think it is. Yeah, no,
Yeah, 154.
140. Is it 154? This is being fought at, or is it
I think it's.
148?
I am gonna fact check that quickly. Yeah, 154 from what I see here,
Okay.
and we know that Fundora is like he's been on a tear recently, like with the win against Tim Tszyu, then Booker, then stopping Tim Tszyu, retiring him in the corner. Like, I know they're fights that compliment him a lot, but
yeah, like look, there's massive question marks around Tim Tszyu, and look, we won't make it about him, but at the same time, it would really make you question just how good those wins really are, considering that we just don't know. We really don't know how good Tszyu actually is, or if he's really going to come back. So,
like, I think he's actually fighting soon as well.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been talked about much. I think it's actually up. It's coming the 5th of April against Dennis Nurja for the WBO WBO International middleweight. Fuck, he's got up
everybody
to middleweight
gets
now.
a belt. Everybody gets a belt at this point.
Jesus. But anyway, I do think from the first Tim Tszyu fight that he had, that was short notice for Tim Tszyu.
Yeah.
He came into that, and even though he lost, like, I think he was very unlucky with the cut on the head and short notice against someone like that size, that reach, everything, you know, it was tough for him. And then Tim Tszyu got knocked out by what is his name? Bakram Murtazaliev. And then to come back in and fight Fundora again, like, you know, it kind of shows that he wasn't the same fighter after the Murtazaliev loss.
Yeah, and look,
for him to retire on his stool, like, you know, for a fighter that used to go to the well time and time again, kind of dog it out. It shows the heart might have been gone in that fight.
I think the body might have been gone, and that's the problem with Tim Tszyu. I think at this point, arguably he could kind of be a bit spent, just based on the type of fights that he's been in. So again, whether or not he kind of comes back to the form that he was in remains to be seen. But yeah, the Fundora fights were kind of strange, I suppose, in a sense. Especially the first one, obviously, with the cut, which was an absolute nightmare for Tszyu. But yeah, to not really offer much in the rematch kind of says a lot, I think.
Yeah, Fundora is a fella that he's not hard to hit, to say the least. So it will be interesting with Thurman, because he's not a light puncher by any means. If he still carries the power at this stage in his career, like, we could see some shaky moments for Fundora.
I still think this in a way is kind of a lose-lose situation for Fundora, though, because if he beats Thurman, people are going to say that, well, look, he's been massively inactive and he's 37 years old. If he loses to Thurman, well, then people will say, well, you lost to a guy who was massively inactive and he's 37 years old. So it's not exactly the kind of fight that you want to get into. It's actually the same situation, really, that Thurman got into with Pacquiao, in a sense.
Yeah. And that didn't go well for him in the end.
Exactly.
And it's been a hard build up for him since that loss.
Arguably, he's never really come back from it.
But you never know. This Saturday he could shake things up. Fundora has been knocked out before, and you know, if he's been knocked out once, it could happen twice. You know, he's probably worked on his defensive skills more since that fight against Mendoza, but Mendoza isn't a brilliant fighter either. From the likes, like, getting beat by Bochuk and Tim Zhu, you know.
Yeah, not by any means. Look, in the end of the day, I suppose what it comes down to is I think on a technical level, I think Thurman's a lot better than Fundora. And I think if he still has anything left, it wouldn't be that surprising for him to win it. But again, you know, it just comes down to how much does he have left. And it's really hard to gauge when the guy's had one fight in 4 years, you know?
Yeah, and that fight was against Brock Davies, which I don't think any of us had heard of beforehand.
Brock Jarvis's own mother doesn't know who he is. Like, the guy's a complete unknown when it comes down to it. So, look, I'm not going to say that fight matters. Look, we'll see what becomes of Thurman. I kind of hope he wins it, just for the story of him coming back. But at the same time, I don't know what that fight really offers. I mean, look, if Fundora loses it, then he lost to a 37-year-old guy who's been ridiculously inactive. So how do you come back from that?
I think it's one of those fights you're kind of expecting Fundora to win, hoping that the underdog in Thurman comes out and just, you know, shows up for the fight. But I think it's unlikely at this stage in his career.
Yeah, I suppose how invested is he really? That's the question. How invested is he?
Yeah,
and how much does he have left?
Yeah, he doesn't seem like he has much left in the tank in boxing terms.
It didn't seem he was all that invested even in his prime, to be honest.
No.
You know, he was one of those guys that he was always kind of a little bit in and out of the sport. So at 37 years old, as we said, 4 years of inactivity pretty much, it's going to be a tough ask. But if he's going to do it against anybody, I think Fundora's there to take, just from a technical standpoint. I think Thurman outclasses him.
So, final predictions for this one?
You know something? I'm probably not going to watch it. I'm going to watch highlights of it the day after on YouTube for about 4 minutes, and that'll be it.
I'm going to be honest. I'm going to do the same, but that is because I'm going to the Magnificent Seven.
At least you have an excuse. I don't.
I have an excuse. Yeah, shame on you.
Yeah, shame on me. How dare I not get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to watch 37-year-old Keith Thurman jab Fundora to death? But yeah, look, I'm going for Thurman.
I actually 6'6" fighter to death.
Yeah, you never know. You never know.
One thing I will say is, why does Fundora fight on the inside?
The same thing could have been said about Brandon Figueroa when he fought Nick Ball a couple of weeks back. He didn't have to fight the way that he fought.
Yeah, makes it more entertaining, I guess, but just doesn't make sense to be on a technical level.
Yeah,
he has such a reach.
There's so many guys like that are these kind of like freakish heights for their weight, and they don't seem to use their reach advantage at all.
Yeah, Callum Smith.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, anyway. So you're looking at Fundora, is it?
I'm looking at Keith Thurman by absolute savage beatdown. 100%. Just technical masterclass. This is going to be like the I suppose generic brand version of Crawford versus Canelo. Just sensational, unbelievable, fight of the year candidate. But no, in all seriousness, I'm going for Thurman to win it by decision.
Yeah, I'm going to throw a curveball out there. I think this is going to be a draw. I'm going to be that asshole that says a draw, and will I tell you why? I have a feeling it's going to be like the Barrios-Pacquiao fight, where even though Thurman did enough to win, I don't think they're going to give it to him.
Yeah, and you know something? It's such a strange fight on paper that why not? Go for the draw, you know, or go for something crazy. You know, maybe Fundora falls out of the ring.
Slips on a banana peel.
Yeah, falls out of the ring onto the table. Table collapses. You know, just like was it Kermit Cintron all those years ago, something like that. But yeah, look, it's one of those fights. As I said, I don't think anybody was asking for it, but we're going to get it regardless, and let's hope it's memorable.
Yeah. Okay. So, lads, that's the first episode of the Absoluteboxxing podcast. Leave your predictions down below.
We made it through it. We had some ridiculous hot takes, and we'll probably be proven to be completely wrong when it comes to weekend. But
I can't wait to watch this back on Sunday.
Yeah, throw it into the comments. Throw it into the comments just how wrong we're going to be.
There'll be that one guy, and he'll go over every point. You're wrong here. You're wrong here.
It's a funny way of saying your friend Ben Whitaker, but anyway, we'll see where that goes.
Ben, if you're watching, you can be the first guest on the podcast. This is an invite. But I hope you all enjoyed this awkward mess of a podcast. We'll be back probably this time next week, maybe Wednesday, maybe a bit earlier, to talk about Chisora versus Wilder and the aftermath of Itauma versus Franklin and Fundora versus Thurman. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you later.